Welcome to today's PsychWSigmund, where we're going to explore one of the most fundamental concepts in psychology, classical conditioning. This concept, first introduced by Ivan Pavlov, explains how our brains learn to associate certain stimuli with specific outcomes, and it has far-reaching implications for our understanding of human behavior, emotion, and thought. So, what is classical conditioning? In simple terms, it's a process where we learn to link a neutral stimulus to an unconditioned stimulus that naturally elicits a response. For example, imagine you're at the beach, and every time you hear the sound of seagulls, you associate it with the smell of salt water and the feeling of sand between your toes. Over time, the sound of seagulls becomes a conditioned stimulus that can evoke a conditioned response, such as feelings of relaxation or excitement. But why is classical conditioning important in psychology? Well, it helps us understand how we learn to navigate our environment, how we develop phobias and anxieties, and how we can overcome them. It also has significant implications for fields like education, marketing, and therapy. Pavlov's original work involved conditioning dogs to salivate in response to the sound of a bell, which was previously neutral. He demonstrated that the dogs could learn to associate the bell with food, leading to a conditioned response. Since then, numerous researchers have built upon Pavlov's work, including John Watson and B.F. Skinner, who explored the role of classical conditioning in human behavior. Our understanding of classical conditioning has evolved significantly over time. We now know that it's not just limited to simple associations between stimuli and responses. Rather, it involves complex neural mechanisms, including the activation of brain regions like the amygdala and the hippocampus. Research has also shown that classical conditioning can occur through various pathways, including visual, auditory, and tactile cues. One notable study that demonstrates the power of classical conditioning is the Little Albert experiment conducted by John Watson and Rosalie Rayner. In this study, a young boy was conditioned to fear a white rat by associating it with a loud noise. The results showed that the boy's fear response could be elicited even when the rat was presented alone, without the noise. This study highlights the rapid and effective nature of classical conditioning. More recent research has explored the neural mechanisms underlying classical conditioning using techniques like functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. For example, a study published in the journal Neuron found that the brain regions involved in classical conditioning, including the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, show increased activity when individuals are exposed to conditioned stimuli. So, how can understanding classical conditioning help us in our everyday lives? Well, for one, it can inform our approaches to learning and behavior change. By recognizing how we learn to associate certain cues with specific outcomes, we can develop more effective strategies for overcoming phobias, anxieties, or other conditioned responses that might be holding us back. Therapeutic approaches like exposure therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy often rely on principles of classical conditioning to help individuals relearn and reassociate stimuli in a more adaptive way. For instance, imagine you have a fear of public speaking. A therapist might use classical conditioning principles to help you gradually become comfortable with speaking in front of an audience. They might start by having you practice speaking in low-stakes situations, such as with a small group of friends, and then gradually increase the difficulty level over time. By associating the stimulus, public speaking, with positive outcomes, supportive feedback from others, your brain can learn to recondition its response, reducing anxiety and fear. Another example is the use of classical conditioning in marketing. Advertisers often use conditioned stimuli, such as jingles or logos, to evoke a desired response, like excitement or nostalgia. By understanding how classical conditioning works, marketers can develop more effective advertising strategies that tap into our emotional associations. In conclusion, classical conditioning is a powerful concept that helps us understand how we learn to navigate our world and respond to various stimuli. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, may your ego find balance between pleasure and reality.